The night had begun like every other charity gala in Marston Heights, champagne flutes clinking, white pearls flashing under crystal chandeliers, and conversations soaked in pedigree and posturing. The Chess Society of Marston, known for its exclusivity and long legacy of champions, was hosting its annual banquet in the Langston Estate ballroom. But tonight, beneath all the tailored tuxedos and custom gowns, one woman moved quietly and mostly unseen. Her name was Alana Price, a black woman in a Navy maid's uniform, pushing a cart stacked with water pitchers, folded napkins, and silence. Alana had worked at Langston Estate for 4 years. Most of the guests didn't know her name, and most didn't care. She was background to them, just a pair of hands that kept the place tidy. But behind her soft-spoken demeanor and tired eyes was a mind sharper than most of the society's self-proclaimed geniuses. No one there knew that Alana had once been a junior chess champion, or that she used to spend weekends across the state playing at tournaments with her father before life unraveled. She hadn't touched a chessboard in years, but the rhythm of strategy still lived quietly in her bones. That night, as she poured wine for a round table of older men debating Carlsen's opening strategy, Alana's ears perked when one of them chuckled, "Even the help probably thinks they can play chess nowadays." Another replied with a smirk, "Maybe we should let the maid make a move tonight, might be the only excitement this game sees." The laughter stung, not because it was new, but because it was so rehearsed, so confidently cruel. Alana said nothing, bowed slightly, and moved on. At the far end of the ballroom stood the exhibition board, a massive, handcrafted wooden setup where 2 club members would duel for entertainment. It wasn't meant to be serious, more like a pageant of wit. Tonight, the challenger was Malcolm Vance, the 32-year-old reigning city champion and grandson of the society's founder. He had never lost a game at the Langston banquet and wasn't about to start. When one of the board's players cancelled last minute due to illness, Malcolm stood and asked the room if anyone else wanted to fill in. "Anyone with the guts and half a brain," he added with a smirk. From the back of the room, Alana's voice rose, not loud, but piercing. "I'll play." A hush fell. Heads turned slowly, like wine being poured in slow motion. Malcolm arched a brow, clearly amused. "You?" he said. "Do you even know how the pieces move?" Murmurs rippled across the room. Someone near the bar whispered, "Oh, this'll be rich." Alana walked forward, untying her apron and folding it neatly on a chair. Her uniform still bore a bleach stain near the hem, but her posture was regal. "Black or white?" she asked. Malcolm grinned. "Ladies first," he said, gesturing toward the white pieces. The room crowded in. Guests gathered, phones ready to record what they expected to be a fast, humiliating loss. Alana sat, her fingers gently brushing each piece as if reacquainting herself with old friends. Malcolm opened aggressively with an e4. Alana mirrored with precision. By the 4th move, the air shifted. Malcolm leaned in. Her defense wasn't just competent, it was clever. "Interesting," he muttered. She responded with a queen's gambit declined, pinning his knight before he could castle. By move 10, half the room wasn't breathing. Malcolm began blinking faster, leaning further in. His confident smirk turned into tight-lipped silence. Alana's style wasn't flashy, it was surgical. Every piece she moved closed a door, every pawn she advanced opened a trap. She played like she'd studied him for years. The crowd, once chuckling, had gone eerily quiet. Even the waitstaff paused in the corners. At move 22, Malcolm stared at the board for nearly 3 full minutes. Then, with a reluctant sigh, he moved his bishop, and it was a mistake. Alana's rook slid into place. Check. He scrambled to counter, but her tempo couldn't be broken. Every move he made, she had already answered in her mind. When she whispered checkmate just 8 moves later, the silence broke into a roar, not applause, not cheers, but stunned gasps. Malcolm sat back, stunned. Who are you?" he asked. Alana stood, pushing her chair in. "Just the maid," she said, then turned and walked away. The room erupted into whispers as she disappeared through the double doors. Some guests tried to laugh it off, others demanded to know if it was a setup. But one person, the club's founder himself, Harold Vance, watched her go with narrowed eyes. Later that night, after the banquet ended, Harold called a private meeting with Malcolm and the board's senior members. "Get her back," he said. "Find out where she learned to play like that." Alana returned to work the next morning like nothing had happened. She scrubbed kitchen counters and mopped hardwood floors with the same quiet discipline. But inside, she felt something crack open, something she had buried beneath bills, caretaking, and lost time. That match had stirred her former self, the girl who once dreamed of going pro before her mother's stroke upended everything. She never expected a chess match to do that. But maybe it had always been waiting. By Monday morning, an email from the Marston Heights Chess Society arrived in Alana's inbox, polite, formal, and far too eager. They invited her to join as an honorary guest player for their upcoming regional showcase. They framed it as a gesture of goodwill and inclusion, but Alana saw through the pageantry. They weren't interested in her story. They wanted her skills. A novelty, a headline, maybe a photo op. She deleted the message without replying and returned to refilling soap dispensers in the estate bathrooms. Later that week, Malcolm himself approached her while she was vacuuming the East Wing. "You embarrassed me," he said, arms crossed but voice unsure. Alana didn't look up. "Didn't mean to." "No," he said. "I mean, you're better than me." He paused. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Alana switched off the vacuum and finally faced him. "My father taught me. We used to drive 4 hours to local tournaments when I was 12. Malcolm shifted awkwardly. "Look, the club wants you back. We'll cover your dues. Even sponsor you in city leagues." Alana chuckled softly, not out of cruelty, but disbelief. "So you want me to clean up your boards now too?" Malcolm winced. "It's not like that." She stepped closer. "It's exactly like that. You all want the glory of my talent, but none of the weight that comes with acknowledging my existence when I'm in uniform." The words hung heavy. "I don't need your club," she added. "But there's a rec center in South Marston with 10-year-olds playing with half a board and no timer. If you really care about chess, donate there." Malcolm was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I'll talk to my grandfather." Alana didn't wait for him to finish. She turned and resumed her cleaning. But something about their conversation lingered. That evening, after her shift, she returned home to her apartment, where her little brother, Isaiah, sat at the kitchen table with homework scattered like shrapnel. "Can we play?" he asked, pointing to the old chess set on the shelf. Alana hadn't touched it since their father died 3 years ago. She smiled, pulled the set down, and reset the board. They played until midnight. Isaiah was smart, too smart to be trapped in the underfunded school system he was stuck in. Alana coached him gently, encouraging bold moves, sacrifices, quiet strength. She saw herself in him, but more than that, she saw the future she never got. That night, after he fell asleep, she opened her laptop and typed something she hadn't dared in years: adult chess tournaments, local entry. Her fingers hovered over the search button. Then she clicked. The following Saturday, Alana stood outside the community gym in a borrowed blazer and jeans that didn't quite fit. She clutched her old tournament set, worn but familiar, like a friend she hadn't seen in years. Inside, folding tables rattled under clocks and plastic pieces. The room smelled like gym socks and old ambition. Her name wasn't on any roster, she had registered as a walk-in. The attendant gave her a quick glance, hesitated when he saw her skin, then handed her a pair number with a tight smile. Board 14. First round starts in 10. Her first opponent was a grad student from MIT with wire-rimmed glasses and a dismissive shrug. He offered her the white pieces as if it were a charity. By move 6, he was chewing his lip. By move 12, his knight was gone, and by move 20, his king had no hope. He shook her hand stiffly at the end and walked away without a word. 2 more matches followed, one against a banking analyst, another against a high school coach. Both underestimated her. Both lost. And just like that, Alana was 3-0. Between rounds, she sat alone with a thermos of tea. No one approached her. No one asked for her name. And that suited her just fine. She wasn't here for applause. She was here for proof to herself that her past wasn't gone, just buried. A woman from the next table leaned over and whispered, "You play sharp. What's your name?" Alana hesitated. "Alana Price." The woman nodded, scribbled it down, and said, "Keep going. They're already talking about you in the other room." Her 4th round brought her face-to-face with Bernard Cho, a 3-time state finalist known for crushing newcomers in under 20 minutes. He glanced at her setup, scoffed at her off-brand timer, and sat down with theatrical indifference. But Alana didn't blink. She opened with a quiet Catalan, baited him into an early queen exchange, and dismantled his center with surgical grace. By move 34, Bernard was staring in disbelief at a board that no longer offered escape. He tipped his king. "Who are you?" he asked. "Just someone who used to play," she replied. By the final round, a small crowd had formed, players who'd already been eliminated, parents, even a couple of local reporters. Alana faced a teenager named Dev Patel, the top seed, undefeated for over a year. He was fast, brilliant, and built for pressure. Their game drew silence as it unfolded. Dev played like lightning, Alana played like gravity. They traded sacrifices, pawns for position, time for tension. And on move 49, with both clocks ticking near zero, she slid her bishop into the final trap. Checkmate. The room broke into stunned applause. Some clapped because they'd never seen Dev lose. Others clapped because they didn't know what else to do. Alana sat back in her chair, heart pounding but face composed. The tournament director approached with a clipboard and a hesitant smile. "Miss Price," he said. "Would you be willing to do a short interview? There's a local columnist covering the event." Alana glanced at the camera pointed her way. "Only if you spell my name right," she said with a smirk. The director chuckled nervously. "Absolutely." Later that evening, as she packed her set into its cracked wooden box, someone tapped her shoulder. She turned and came face to face with Harold Vance, the founder of the Marston Heights Chess Society. "Miss Price," he said smoothly. "I believe we may have gotten off on the wrong foot." Alana narrowed her eyes. "Didn't think we got on any foot at all." He gave a slow nod. "Fair. But I'd like to change that. We're launching a new public outreach initiative. Coaching, mentorship, the works. We want someone authentic at the helm." Alana crossed her arms. "You mean someone black?" Harold didn't flinch. "We mean someone brilliant. But I won't insult you by pretending race doesn't matter. It does. Visibility matters. And you've made people look." For a moment, she stared at him, unsure if he meant it. Then she said, "I don't coach for vanity projects. If this is just PR, I'm not your pawn." He shook his head. "It's real. And the funding is real too. We've already partnered with the South Marston Rec Center. You mentioned it to my grandson." He remembered. Alana felt her breath catch. That detail, Malcolm listening, surprised her more than Harold's proposal. "What does the job pay?" she asked. "Enough," Harold replied, "and then some." She nodded slowly, still unsure if this was a step forward or a trap. "I'll think about it." He extended a card. "I'll wait for your call. But don't take too long, momentum matters." As he walked away, Alana stood holding the card between her fingers, her reflection in the gym's exit glass half shadow, half light. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the card and listening to Isaiah snore softly in the next room. She thought about every time someone had told her what she couldn't be. Too poor, too black, too female, too responsible for everyone else's survival. Then she thought about the girl who had once won a regional title in high school while wearing her mom's borrowed blazer and beat a state finalist before she even had her learner's permit. That girl wasn't gone. She had just been waiting. The next morning, Alana called the number on the card. Her voice was steady, her words direct. "I'll do it, but on my terms." She outlined what she needed: full autonomy to build the program, paid assistant coaches from the neighborhood, and scholarships for her students to enter tournaments. She expected pushback, maybe a polite delay. But Harold Vance responded with a simple, "Deal." By the end of the week, the South Marston Chess Initiative was born, and at its center stood Alana Price. Alana stepped into the rec center's main hall with a clipboard in one hand and a box of chessboards in the other. The floor was scuffed, the windows dusty, but the room pulsed with potential. She and a few volunteers scrubbed every corner until the space felt ready. Flyers went out to nearby schools. Word spread. And on the first day, 27 kids showed up, wide-eyed, restless, and hungry for something bigger than their zip code. Alana welcomed each one by name, just like her father once had with her. She started the program with no flashy promises. Just a simple challenge: you may never win a trophy, but you will leave here smarter, braver, and harder to beat in life. Her students leaned in. Many had never played before. Some had never been told they were intelligent. Alana taught them more than openings and tactics. She taught discipline, patience, risk-taking. Chess isn't about how fast you move, she'd say. It's about knowing when not to. And they listened, because she saw them, and they felt it. Soon, the program exploded. Donations poured in from local businesses and anonymous benefactors, one of whom Alana suspected was still named Malcolm. Journalists came sniffing for a feel-good story. A city council member asked if she'd run for office someday. Alana ignored the noise and stayed focused on the kids. Isaiah had become her star pupil, and he now led the advanced group, coaching younger players between classes. On weekends, Alana drove students to regional matches in borrowed vans, cheering louder than any parent in the crowd. One Saturday, after a successful run at a city invitational, a little girl named Trinity tugged Alana's sleeve. "Coach, when did you know you were good?" Alana knelt beside her, brushing braids out of the child's eyes. "When people stopped clapping for me, and I kept going anyway." Trinity blinked, then grinned. "I want to be like that too." Alana smiled. "You already are." That night, as the kids piled back into the van, Alana looked in the rearview mirror. What she saw wasn't just students, it was legacy. Not one she inherited. One she built. 2 months later, an envelope arrived in Alana's mailbox, thick cardstock, gold-trimmed. Inside was an official invitation to the National Chess Summit, the highest profile open tournament in the country. It wasn't just the prestige, it was the same event she had once dreamed of entering as a teenager before everything in her life derailed. Now, nearly 15 years later, her name was back on the list. Only this time, it wasn't just her dream on the line, it was her students' belief in what was possible. At first, she hesitated. She told herself she didn't have the time, that the program needed her more than the spotlight did. But deep down, another voice whispered, "Show them what happens when we stop shrinking." She asked Isaiah what he thought. He didn't even look up from his workbook. "You already beat Malcolm," he said. "This should be easy." She laughed. "National isn't easy." "Then show them hard doesn't scare you." The next day, she registered. Preparation was brutal. Every night after classes ended, Alana studied openings until her eyes blurred. She replayed Grandmaster matches. Sparred online. Reviewed mistakes. Isaiah helped run the rec center, and volunteers stepped in to coach. Her students made a handmade banner that read "Go Coach A," and taped it to the rec hall wall. Some of the older kids even set alarms to quiz her on endgames at sunrise. It wasn't just her tournament anymore, it was theirs too. When she arrived at the summit in Philadelphia, she walked into a sea of branded hoodies, sleek boards, and international flags. Players eyed her curiously, some confused, some dismissive. One man in a pressed suit glanced at her and asked, "Press or hospitality staff?" "Competitor," she replied. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She took her seat at board 82 and breathed in the energy, not intimidation, not doubt, but focus. She was here. And she was ready. The first few rounds went fast. She played steady and sharp, dismantling early opponents with a mix of patience and intuition. After each win, her name moved higher on the rankings, and whispers began circulating about the black woman from nowhere beating seeded players. Her photo started popping up on the tournament's social media feed. Coaches leaned in. Commentators took notice. And back in South Marston, the rec center streamed every match on an old projector while students watched with wide eyes and louder cheers. By the 6th round, Alana was seated across from Grandmaster Viktor Kozlov, a Russian titan of the game who had trained since he was 4. He studied her for a long moment before extending his hand. "You are surprising many," he said with a faint smirk. "Good." Alana shook his hand firmly. "I didn't come here to surprise anyone," she said. "I came to win." The match drew an immediate crowd. Titled players lingered near the velvet ropes, murmuring. A black woman with no international record going toe-to-toe with a legend? Cameras clicked. Tension crackled. Victor opened with a Sicilian defense, aggressive, sharp, and dangerous. Alana responded coolly with the Rosso Limo variation. Each move was like a sword drawn, and she met his strikes with parries honed not just from textbooks, but from years of quiet resilience. Mid-game, Victor attempted a trap, sacrificing his rook to open her kingside. But Alana anticipated it 3 moves ahead. She declined the bait and tightened her position, creating a fortress out of calculated patience. The crowd leaned in. Even Kozlov blinked. By move 37, the position was razor-thin. One wrong pawn push could mean collapse. Both clocks ticked under 5 minutes. Alana stared at the board, her mind tuning out the whispers, the flashing lights, the history pressing in on her shoulders. She saw it, a diagonal sacrifice that would seem reckless, but would force an endgame where her pawns would march like soldiers with destiny. She took a breath, lifted her bishop, and let it fly. The room gasped. Victor recoiled, narrowed his eyes, and realized she'd outmaneuvered him. Not by luck. By understanding. His king was cornered. His tempo was broken. He stalled as long as he could, then tipped his king over. The room fell into stunned silence, then exploded into applause. Alana exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Victor stood, shook her hand again, and smiled genuinely. "You are not here to surprise," he said. "You are here to remind us." Reporters swarmed her after the match, but she offered only a few words. "This win is for every black girl who's been told to stand on the sidelines. We're done waiting for permission to play." Back in South Marston, the rec center erupted like a stadium. Kids ran around chanting her name. Isaiah FaceTimed her through the tears. "I knew you'd cook that guy," he shouted. Alana laughed so hard she cried. That night, as she lay in her hotel bed staring at the ceiling, she whispered, "Daddy, we made it." When Alana stepped off the bus back in South Marston, she expected a quiet walk home. Instead, a crowd was waiting. Her students held up handmade signs, "Queen Alana, you checkmated history, coacher for president." And someone had even hired a local jazz trio to play as she walked through the rec center doors. Parents clapped, teens hugged her, and Isaiah handed her a crown made out of glittered cardboard. "You're our champ," he said. Alana didn't fight the tears this time. She let them fall, proud and unashamed. A few days later, the city council awarded her the Excellence in Civic Impact Medal. News stations ran features on her story, and chess clubs across the country reached out, asking her to speak or mentor. Universities offered scholarships, not just to her students, but to her. One day, she came home to find a letter from a national chess board committee inviting her to serve as their first black female board member. She smiled, then folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer. "Maybe," she said to herself. "But on my time." Despite the recognition, Alana remained focused on the rec center. She expanded the program, hired 2 assistants, and introduced a mentorship initiative pairing advanced students with younger ones. Under her guidance, 4 students earned scholarships. 1 was featured in a national kids chess magazine, and Isaiah qualified for the junior state finals. She cheered him on from the front row, nerves rattling her knees, and when he won, she cried louder than anyone. At the next annual Marston Heights banquet, the Chess Society extended a formal invitation to Alana as a guest of honor. This time, she didn't arrive in uniform. She walked through the same ballroom in a fitted black blazer and gold earrings, flanked by Isaiah and 2 of her students. Malcolm Vance greeted her at the door with a handshake and a quiet, sincere apology. "You were never just a maid," he said. "You were the best player in the room, and we just couldn't see it." Alana nodded. "Now you do." That night, she didn't play an exhibition match. She coached one. Her students sat at the grand board while the elite circled in awe. And when one child landed a clever mate-in-4 combination, the room erupted. Alana stood back, hands folded, watching. Not for glory, but for change. She had once been mocked for daring to sit at the table. Now she built the tables. And every time someone doubted her, she remembered what her father once said, "The best players don't shout. They move in silence, and they win loud." Weeks passed, and life at the rec center settled into a steady rhythm. But something stirred quietly inside Alana, a realization that, for the first time in her adult life, she had the space to dream again. Not just for her students. For herself. One evening, she sat on the rooftop of her apartment building, legs crossed, chess notebook in her lap, staring at the stars. Isaiah joined her with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "You've done everything for us," he said. "Maybe it's time you do something for you." That night, Alana opened her laptop and researched universities with part-time data science programs. She'd always loved numbers, patterns, the elegance of logic. It was something she'd buried beneath survival, but never forgotten. 2 weeks later, she submitted her application to 3 programs. When the acceptance letters arrived, she taped the first one to the rec center bulletin board with a handwritten note that read, "Coach A's next opening move." Transitioning into student life wasn't easy. She juggled coursework, rec center duties, and community events with the same grit she brought to every game. But for the first time, she didn't feel like she was running on empty. She felt full of purpose, potential, and peace. Her students cheered her on like she was their champion, and in many ways, she was. But she had also learned to cheer for herself. That was the part she had almost forgotten. One afternoon, while on a lunch break between classes, Alana got a call from the director of the National Chess Foundation. "We're building a new national mentorship program," he said. "It's time we centered women, black women especially, in the conversation. You'd be our first lead strategist. We'd give you your own team." Alana sat in silence for a moment, then replied, "Only if we include community-based programs, and the curriculum is built with input from kids like mine." The director didn't hesitate. Done. Months later, Alana stood on the main stage at the National Chess Gala, accepting the Trailblazer Award. Her speech was short, powerful, and delivered with that same calm edge she once brought to the board. I was never just a maid. I was never just anything. And neither are our kids. If you give them the chance to make the first move, you'll be amazed at how they finish the game. The crowd rose to their feet. Not just clapping, but believing. That was the real victory. As autumn settled over South Marston, the leaves turned golden and the rec center buzzed with new energy. Alana's mentorship program had gone national, and universities were now scouting talent from neighborhoods they once ignored. One crisp Saturday morning, while setting up boards for a youth match, Alana turned to find a familiar face in the doorway. Malcolm Vance, older, quieter, holding a box of brand new chess clocks. I thought your kids deserved better than busted timers, he said. And? I was hoping for a rematch. Alana raised an eyebrow. You sure? Last time didn't go so well for you. He grinned. I've had some practice. She waved him in and gestured to a table. They played a quick blitz game while the kids watched and giggled from behind their fingers. Malcolm was better this time, tighter, less arrogant, but Alana still won. As she reset the pieces, he leaned forward and said, I don't just come here for chess. She glanced up, the room suddenly very quiet. I know, she replied. And I'm not saying no. They took it slow. Lunches after coaching sessions. Walks through the city's garden trails. Conversations that drifted from strategy to philosophy to childhood regrets. Malcolm didn't try to fix her. He simply saw her, her brilliance, her scars, her victories. And Alana, for the first time, let herself be seen. Not as a savior. Not as a symbol. Just a woman learning how to breathe again. When he kissed her for the first time after a game she actually lost, she laughed so hard she nearly forgot to kiss him back. Isaiah noticed the change. You smile more, he said one day while reorganizing the rec center's trophy shelf. Alana shrugged. Is that so bad? No, he replied. You just look like you're winning, even when you're not playing. She ruffled his hair. That's what happens when you realize life's not just about checkmates. It's about what you build in between the moves. She looked around at the kids laughing, the coaches mentoring, the community buzzing. This wasn't just a program anymore. It was a movement. On the anniversary of the night she first sat across from Malcolm at the Langston estate, Alana returned to the same ballroom, this time as the keynote speaker. As she stood at the podium, looking out over a room that once laughed at her, she spoke with clarity and fire. They mocked me as just a maid, she said. But they forgot that queens start at the back of the board, and still become the most powerful piece in the game. The room stood as one. Not in pity. Not in shock. But in respect. And this time, she made the final move. In the weeks that followed her keynote speech, Alana found herself flooded with invitations, from TED Talks to Ivy League panels, from grassroots meetups to international chess expos. But she accepted only those that aligned with her purpose. I'm not here to be your story, she told one TV producer. I'm here to make sure our kids can write their own. Meanwhile, the South Marston Chess Initiative expanded into 3 more neighborhoods, each led by a former student turned coach. The vision had grown beyond her, but its heartbeat was still hers. One morning, she sat with Isaiah in their small kitchen, sipping tea as the sun poured in. He held a college brochure in his hand, one with his name stamped in bold letters, full scholarship, State University, computer science. You did this, he said softly. Alana smiled. No, she replied. You did this. I just made sure the world didn't miss it. It was one of those moments where time paused, where all the late nights and silent sacrifices were finally answered in full. With the extra funding rolling in, Alana hired a full-time administrative team, freeing herself to do what she loved most, teach. On any given day, you could still find her kneeling beside a chessboard, helping a 6-year-old understand the magic of a fork or the courage of a sacrifice. To her, it wasn't about the pieces, it was about teaching them they were capable of strategy, vision, and triumph. She used chess the way a sculptor uses clay, to shape belief. Then came the email from Paris. The World Women's Invitational had noticed her US Summit win and invited her to join a global showcase. Not a competition, but a celebration of brilliance across borders. They asked her to speak, to play, and to represent not just America, but possibility. Alana stared at the message for nearly an hour. Then she closed her laptop and walked down to the rec center. I need someone to cover for me in August, she told her team. I've got a plane to catch. The event in Paris was everything she hoped, diverse, vibrant, challenging. She played against grandmasters from Ghana, Brazil, and Japan. She spoke on stages where her words were translated into 6 languages. And one afternoon, during a roundtable discussion, a young woman from Nigeria approached her and said, "I started chess because I saw your video. In my town, they call you Coach Queen." Alana didn't know what to say. She just hugged the girl and promised to keep moving the pieces forward. Back in South Marston, her students tracked every match online. When she returned, they had painted a mural on the rec center wall, Alana, seated at a board, wearing a golden crown with pawns surrounding her, each with a different child's face. Underneath it read, "She made her first move, so we could make ours." She stood before it in tears, holding Malcolm's hand. "I don't know what I did to deserve this," she whispered. "You showed up," he said. "You didn't wait for a better room. You brought the room with you." Malcolm proposed 1 year later, nothing grand, just a park bench near the rec center with a velvet box and a king piece inside. Alana laughed and cried all at once. "You know," she said, "I always thought marriage was just another game of control." "Then let's change the rules," he replied. She said yes before he could even stand up. Their wedding was small, filled with laughter, jazz, Isaiah's terrible toast, and chessboard centerpieces at every table. Love, like chess, had become her second act, and this one, she wasn't playing alone. Her memoir, Checkmate from the Back Row, hit bestseller lists in under a week. In it, she chronicled her life not just as a black woman breaking barriers, but as someone who chose not to be erased. She donated all profits to fund scholarships and new rec center builds across underserved cities. Every book came with a note that read, "This is not about me. This is about what's possible when we stop apologizing for being brilliant." Years later, Alana sat in the front row of Isaiah's college graduation. He walked the stage in a red sash with honors and turned to smile at her before receiving his diploma. Her heart swelled so fully it ached. After the ceremony, he hugged her so tight she could barely breathe. "I did it, Coach," he whispered. "You always had it in you," she replied. "I just taught you how to see the whole board." On the drive home, Alana looked out at the city lights, her fingers curled gently around Malcolm's. Her story had begun in the shadows of chandeliers, scrub brushes in hand, mocked and underestimated. But now she understood, power wasn't given at the front of the room. It was claimed from the back. And just like a queen on the board, she had learned to move wherever she needed, in any direction, with grace, grit, and unshakable clarity. If this story moved you, if you believe in rising from the back of the board and proving the world wrong, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that celebrate strength, resilience, and the voices too often left unheard. Your next favorite story is just one click away.